James and I are coming to Boston's Schubert Theater for a live show on November 2nd with historian Doris Goodwin. Tell them about what we have planned, James. This is 3 days before the election.
Good time playing. Okay, first of all, Doris, one of the most interesting people in the entire United States. We're right before the election. We're just going to have a lot of things to talk about and try to be insightful and have some fun. Boston's one of the great cities, not in the United States, in the entire world. Early November is a great time to be there. So we hope a lot of people come out and talk to us and visit with us and, get informed and get excited and get motivated. I look forward to it.
You really don't want to miss it. Go to politicon.com/tour and get your tickets for November 2nd at the Schubert Theater in Boston, Massachusetts. Don't wait. They're going fast, and we want to see as many of you there as we can. So head to politicon.com/tour now to get your tickets for November 2nd at the Schubert Theater in Boston. Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week, our guests are the Deputy Bureau Chief of the Associated Press and the author of The Price of Power on Mitch McConnell, Michael Tackett, and the Washington Bureau Chief of the Detroit News to talk about Michigan, Melissa Burke. Now remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. Now, we're going to get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. Now, before we get started, get out your calendars. James and I are taking Politics War Room on tour. So come see us live at Boston's Schubert Theater on November 2nd with guest Doris Kearns-Goodwin. Get tickets at politicon.com/tour. We really can't wait to see you there 3 days before the election. In other exciting news, the documentary, Carville, Winning is Everything, Stupid, is out now. I saw it for the second time last Saturday. It gets better. Get updates and some great behind-the-scenes content by following James on Twitter @JamesCarville, and now, get this, on his new TikTok @RealJamesCarville. You can also get the text updates about what's next for Politicon and Politics War Room by signing up at politicon.com. Tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And please check out the links to our sponsors, Mint Mobile, Miracle Made, and Quince. We thank you for supporting these sponsors because it really helps make this podcast happen. James Carville, your piece in the New York Times on Wednesday says Kamala Harris is going to win this election. Tell us why.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of reasons that I say that. Number one, she has a tremendous financial advantage. Secondly, I don't know what it counts, but she certainly has she has an organization. She has a GOTV, voter contact operation. He has none. It's got to be worth something. Another reason that you just cannot ignore is the Democrats have not lost an election in the last 2.5 years. I mean, they'll start now. Right. And I think that the issues that she also has, if they use them and deploy them correctly, they have the surrogate battle won 98-2. And not just political surrogates, not just President Obama or President Clinton, but cultural surrogates, entertainment surrogates, athletic surrogates. I mean, I think she's got to create a sense of all of this coming together. I think that you're going to see more and more, I hope they do, have a lot of other kind of national security, right-leaning, kind of types coming out more and coming out harder and giving harder definition on this race. And, hopefully, and I think they have a pretty good closing plan. At least I certainly hope they do. But on some of the underlying stuff, I think people's attitudes are a little bit changing about the economy a little bit. They should have changed a long time ago, but that's just where we are. And above all, you're never any better than you think you are. And Democrats, it's kind of a tie race, and they were lapsed into profound depression. And a depressed party is not a winning party. So anything that I can do to address that kind of depression, I'm glad to do it. And I'm glad the Times gave me a platform, and I was happy to write it. And I think all the things I said in there are valid and true. And, hopefully they'll all come to fruition.
You wouldn't mind seeing a Taylor Swift concert for Kamala, say somewhere in Pennsylvania, would you?
Right. Just any number of these kind of cultural people that are coming out for her, you can use it to build momentum. I mean, whether or not you can say whether somebody says vote somebody, what's that impact? I don't know, and neither does anybody else, but it would sure dominate the news cycle. And anything that she said or you said at that event would get real coverage because everybody would watch it. I mean, or Bruce Springsteen, these people have come out and they got to use them, and they got to use them to make real, create real momentum and blanket him out of the cycle. And they got to do that most nights between now and election day.
Yeah. James, you mentioned that she has a better get out the vote effort. We've both been doing this for a long time, you on the inside, me on the outside. And usually the differences are so small. Both sides have try real hard and get out the vote. And it doesn't usually make much of a difference unless you're really bad. This time it might, because the Democrats, the Harris people, have a really quite robust get out the vote, and the Republicans have farmed it out. And let me give you just one example. We talked to Ben Wickler in Wisconsin about this a couple of weeks ago, but let me give you an example in Pennsylvania, where Elon Musk is running their ground game. My sister lives in Chester County, Babby Davis. She's a big Democrat. She's got a huge Harris Walls sign on her front yard. I mean, really huge. And the other day, a Elon Musk Trump person came by to try to talk to her to see if she'd vote for Donald Trump. That was a waste of time. And she said it was quite clear the only reason he stopped by was because he has to fill a quota. And I think that may be indicative. And, it's not going to make huge difference, but if it makes a half a point or a point, that could decide the election.
So let me give you some anecdotal evidence that would buttress your point and make sense. A couple of people have called me and said, look, I just had to go. I went to Pennsylvania and I did door knocking. And I said, really? I said, how did you know what doors to knock on? He says, well, they gave me, the Bucks County Democratic Party gave me a list of voters who are likely to be Democrat but didn't turn out last time or something like that. I mean, even if you just go willy-nilly knocking on doors,
right,
you're not going to be that effective. But I tell you, another person I know did the same thing. And I always ask, where did you get your list from? How did you know where to go? And they said, well, they gave me now is the list perfect? Or are you going to, no. But I'd much rather have a door, if you're going to have that. I'd rather postcard writing, but that's me. People, there are a lot of people that just feel compelled to be on the ground. All right? And a lot of people do it with their children and, kind of part of, and that's fine. But what I was encouraged by is there actually was a reason that you knocked on a door. And if you go show up knocking on doors and you don't get a list, I think you're wasting your time.
Well, and I'll tell you, Elon Musk, I'm sorry, but you don't have Babby Davis's vote. You never will, and you're wasting your time. But James, I think that, look, there are a lot of things you want to do at the end. You want to have some kind of coherent economic message and all that. I think there's nothing more important than what she's starting to do, which is using as many Republicans and generals and others to make the case that this is not just a Bush-Dukakis race or a Romney-Obama race. This is an existential danger. And I think that point has to be driven home. Liz Cheney is doing it very well out there with her. I was very pleased to see John Kelly, the former chief of staff, in an interview with the Times, and Jeff Goldberg, really echo what Mark Milley said. This guy's a fascist, who talked about the good things that Hitler did. The more of that, and I would just finally say, Jim Mattis and George W. Bush, we're waiting for you.
Yeah, you bring up a point. It should have been at the top of my list, so why I think she's going to win. The Democratic coalition is unified, from Liz Cheney to AOC or anything like that. And they have great leeway in what they do or don't do. And I think people are actually cool with seeing these people come out. And I do think, one of the keys here, because I don't think we're going to replicate the 2020 coalition. It's pretty clear we're not. I'd do better than, get one more story about young black males who will jump out the window. But, we're going to have to do pretty well with college-educated whites. And I think we'll do better than any Democrats ever done, but kind of soft or kind of lean Republican voters. But that's going to be key to her winning, because we're just not going to get the same percentage contribution or same percentage of vote as some Democratic constituencies that we've become accustomed to. And I'll give a lot of people in the party credit. They're like, hey, go out and do what you got to do, just win the thing. And that's always a good place to start in any campaign.
It is. And finally, I would just repeat to General Mattis, General Kelly, General Milley, your successor, Mark Esper, have all stood up for freedom. We're waiting to hear from you. Okay, James, we'll be back with our final pre-election show next week. But everybody, if you haven't out there, make sure you've read James's New York Times piece today on how Kamala Harris is going to win.
Save on your cell service with Mint Mobile. Penny saved is a penny earned. Why wouldn't you because it's something you all have. Everybody that's a show has a cell phone, all right? So if whatever money you save is money in your pocket or money somewhere that you got. And if you start taking savings and extrapolate them out over a period of time, it ends up to be not just a little bit of money, but a kind of consequential amount of money.
Well, I think, you're absolutely right. Because, look, we love a great deal as much as the next person, but we're not going to walk through hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, particularly for people like you and me, James. No BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, you can call them out on it and you'll see it's absolutely right. It turns out it is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process is sitting on hold, waiting to break up with your old provider. Now, we may not be the most tech savvy. That understates the case, James. But if we're able to do it, you can do it. The website is incredibly simple to navigate. And when you get down to business in no time. That's when we knew we had to get our kids and grandkids using Mint Mobile too. Like all of you, they have a lot more important things to use their hard-earned allowances for. So to get started, go to mintmobile.com/warroom. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. Now, to get this new customer offer and your 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/warroom. That's mintmobile.com/warroom. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/warroom. $45 upfront payment is required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 GB on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details or look for the link in the show notes. James, a special guest, Michael Tackett, one of the most respected journalists in Washington. He is a deputy bureau chief for the Associated Press and the author of a terrific new book, The Price of Power: How Mitch McConnell Mastered the Senate, Changed America, and Lost His Party. Mike, this was a terrific book because it really was deeply researched. A lot of books on congressional leaders have been clip jobs, 30 or 40 interviews and a bunch of clips. You spent years working on this, and we know what the headlines are today. We'll get to them in a minute, but this guy was not a likely powerful congressional leader if you look back 50 years or so. First, tell us about the Mitch McConnell journey until he got to the Senate.
Well, he was hardly an overnight success, that's for sure. So he starts out, by the time he realized he couldn't be an athlete, he realized he wanted to be a politician.
And this was in high school. He couldn't be an athlete in part because he was a polio victim.
Right. So, he had physical limitations and the competition got better, but he had an extremely competitive nature, part of which probably came from being a polio survivor. So he channeled that extremely competitive nature into politics. And he always planned ahead. Even when he wanted to run for high school office, he started running 2 years before the election. And he knew that he wasn't the most popular kid in high school, which is usually how you win a high school election. So what he did was he got cheerleaders and athletes to endorse him. So they would think he was a popular kid. And then he won that election. And then he went on to do it again in college. And then he went through a period of his life where, he calls it the lost decade, where he really couldn't get a steady job. He hated being a lawyer. He finally got an opportunity in 1976 to run for an office called County Judge Executive in Louisville. So you're like the top county political person. Nobody thought he was going to win, but he comes back and he defeats an incumbent, and that puts him on his path.
On the path to the Senate. So let's bring it up to date. He was, as you point out, has been one of the most powerful congressional leaders in modern times. We can go through some of the particulars in a moment. But you write that he really he hates Trump. He calls him a despicable human being. He thinks he's not fit for office. He thinks he committed an impeachable offense on January the 6th, and he ought to pay a price. And yet, he has endorsed Trump. Explain that.
It's sort of simple, even though it won't be very satisfying to most people. The simple answer is, if he wanted to stay as the leader in the Senate, he couldn't do that and not support the nominee of his party. Because then he would no longer be leader of the Senate.
And he's not going to be the leader of the Senate.
Well, again, you're exactly right. And I think what he's thinking about is not necessarily the presidential election. He's thinking about the Senate elections. And he didn't want to do anything to try to upend or change a Senate race that may have been going the Republicans' way because of his views on Trump.
I think you and I have talked about this. I really believe that in February 2021, he made a major miscalculation. If he had voted to impeach Trump then, I looked at those senators who didn't vote to convict. I think there's at least a 50-50 chance, maybe better, he could have delivered 9 more. And if they'd impeached Trump then on a simple majority vote, they could have said, you can't run for office again. That might have cost him in the 2022 midterms. I mean, maybe Ron Johnson would have lost. Oh, God, what a gift that would have been. And would have cost him some. I think he still would have been Republican leader. But he calculated that Trump would just fade away. And his vaunted instincts really failed him, didn't it? He'd be so much better off if he had done the former and Trump couldn't run for office.
Well, the way he looked at it was he thought after everything Trump had been through, after everything related to January 6th, that there was no way that he was very likely to continue as a leader in the party. And at the same time, with the 2022 midterms coming up, he didn't want to alienate the base of the party, which is the Trump supporter. As you know, very bad miscalculation. Republicans didn't win the Senate anyway, and Donald Trump became his party's nominee.
Right. James.
So, Mike, I've always heard, and I think this is true, but I get you to confirm it, that McConnell had polio when he was younger, and he also kind of came up as a very kind of pro-civil rights Republican. Are both of those some truth to it?
Both of those are true, and it's a really important part of his story because he gets polio when he's 2 years old, and his father is overseas fighting in World War II. And so he ends up with his mother, and they stay at an aunt's house on the Georgia-Alabama border. And he was lucky in the sense because he was only an hour from Warm Springs, Georgia, where FDR famously, had a polio treatment center. So he went there and was diagnosed, and they gave his mother a treatment plan. The treatment plan was, here's this 2-year-old boy, but tell him not to walk. He can't walk. He obviously physically could walk, but they thought that would retard his rehabilitation. So she spent 4 times a day, 45 minutes a day, doing physical therapy with him in a small bedroom in that home. And he was basically like that for 2 years. So it was an extremely formative experience. And with respect to civil rights, he gets a lot of that from his father. His father, I think part of it was his service in the military, and part of it was just innate. But his father would write him letters and talk about the dignity of all people and why it was so important. And when the Civil Rights Bill was passed, his father wrote him a letter, and he told him, he said, I really wish we didn't have to have this kind of law, but we do. And I think that really stuck with him. The other thing that stuck with him was he was an intern for a senator named John Sherman Cooper. John Sherman Cooper was an internationalist. He was a moderate Republican senator from Kentucky, a great friend of John F. Kennedy and other people in the Democratic Party, was somebody seen as, sort of your ideal of a senator. And he had an enormous impression on McConnell. McConnell said he always felt he was in the company of greatness when he was with John Sherman Cooper. And in 1965, McConnell was visiting Washington, went to see Cooper, and Cooper said, come with me. And he took him over into the Capitol when LBJ signed the civil rights legislation. So he saw that. He also saw the March on Washington, where he was standing in the Capitol. He wasn't in the crowd, but he could see how powerful that movement was. And really throughout his career, maybe not contemporarily to some people, but he has been very pro-civil rights.
Like, give us a recent example.
Well, what he looks at it now is that it shouldn't be special preferences. So the person who believed in public accommodations, voting rights, all those sorts of things, that sort of advocacy stopped when it came to things like affirmative action.
Okay. So, but it's fair to say that the Republican Party in Kentucky, when Mitch McConnell started his career, is an entirely different breed of thoroughbred horse than the Republican Party today is. I mean, it's
absolutely, as was the Democratic Party back then too.
Yes, yeah.
The Democratic Party was still very conservative, largely.
Well, I know this is extrapolating out, and so it's hard to give these historical what ifs. But what would John Sherman Cooper have thought of Donald Trump?
I think he would have thought he was anathema to everything he stood for.
All right.
He stood for civility. He stood for the United States having a role in the world. He stood for an order in the Senate that relied on comedy and not fighting. Absolutely a polar opposite.
So I have a very important question, and I think I would trust your answer on this as much as anybody's. And I don't want you to hem and haw. I want an answer. Who's going to win the World Series?
The Los Angeles Dodgers.
Hey, James, can I interrupt? His son works for the Los Angeles Dodgers. This is a blatant conflict of interest. I hope he's right, but
Well, if you can't help your own kid, what the hell can
that's
you do?
true.
Huh?
That's true.
So I heard a rumor, I don't believe it, that Indiana football is undefeated.
James, that is more than a rumor. And I'll have you know they're ranked number 11 in the country right now.
Oh, and I think Illinois beat Michigan, and Indiana's undefeated. Is the world of college football topsy-turvy a little bit now?
Let's just say that I'm not ready for them to go into Baton Rouge yet.
So by way of background, Mike is one of the most knowledgeable sports fans that I know, and I had him on here. I couldn't pass up the opportunity. He's also one of the most passionate. Is it Indiana University or University of Indiana? I always get stuck on that.
University.
And that's really kind of different, isn't it? Because everything else is the University of Michigan, California, whatever. All right, Al, go. You go.
Well, let's just say in sports, just for one question. Mike is really eminently qualified to cover Donald Trump because when he was a college newspaper writer, he covered Bobby Knight. So if there's any preparation for covering a bully, Michael got it when he was in college.
Formative experience.
Right. Mike, let me go back to the book. I, as you know, have been a critic of McConnell. I think he's done, he's been every bit as powerful as you say. And friends of his like George Will always called him an institutionalist. I mean, he worked as an intern there and he'd been there for so many years. But what he did on the Supreme Court, and by the way, I would say everything else he did, including things I disagreed with, filibuster and everything in the Obama administration, the Court of Appeals, 54 judges that he got through, the campaign finance stuff, I disagree, but it was all legitimate. However, when it came to the Supreme Court in 2017, he made a decision that the Supreme Court would be an 8-member rather than a 9-member court for at least 11 months. He refused to even allow a hearing or a vote on Merrick Garland. And you write he considers that his proudest accomplishment. He also, I think, changed his reputation forever. And maybe even more important, he changed the reputation of the court. It is now viewed as a totally partisan court. And there were other elements to that, but a lot of that had to do with the way he not illegally, but illicitly fixed the court. And I just say, finally, he claimed that there was a principle behind that, namely that you don't confirm a Supreme Court justice in an election year when one party controls the Senate and the other controls the White House. The problem with that, of course, is he voted in 1988 for Anthony Kennedy when it was a Democratic senator and a Republican nominee. I really think it just belied the fact. I mean, he is not an institutionalist. He's a person who pursues power.
Well, there's no question that was the blunt force use of power. And there's also no question that whatever thin reeds of precedent they argued were there are just that. They're very thin, if at all. And what it demonstrated was, the interesting thing about Senator McConnell is he's sort of universally unpopular. As he said to me several times, I know all the Democrats hate me because of Garland, and I know half the Republicans hate me because of Trump. But the constituency that he always had to win over was more than half of the Republicans in the Republican conference in the Senate. And he's been able to do that. And it was interesting to interview many of his colleagues who you would think would disagree with his decision. And they can rationalize it, and they rationalize it very clearly.
Yeah. For a guy who has been such a formidable figure in the Republican Party, and if you're a conservative, you ought to say he's been one of our heroes, whether it's judicial appointments or blocking Obama or any of that other stuff. And yet he goes to the Republican convention this summer, and when he stands up to cast Kentucky's vote, he gets booed. I mean, that must have hurt, Mike.
I would think it would. And, he's got a pretty thick skin, and he internalizes a lot of that because he knows that, he's the punching bag, and in many respects, deservedly so. But here at the Republican convention, those are Trump lovers, and they are certainly not going to be fans of his. And it's kind of an embarrassing moment, to think that you're going to get one moment of validation, but you don't.
One question, then turning back to James. What's his opinion of J.D. Vance?
I think that he started off, like a lot of people in 2016, liking J.D. Vance. Their memoirs both came out at about the same time. He had some discussions with him, and then you really thought of him potentially as a political figure. Then Vance, the closer he got to his Senate race, the more he started to take views that McConnell thought were going to be problematic in winning the Senate race in Ohio. And so I think he soured on him, and certainly disagrees with him very strongly about Ukraine. Vance is, of course, the leading Republican opposing aid in Ukraine, and McConnell's probably the leading Republican favoring aid in Ukraine.
James.
So, like any politician that has been around as long as McConnell has acquired that kind of power, it was a load of compromising on the road to his horizon. Put in Glenn Campbell's words. Is there, after knowing him and writing a biography and literally being with him for 2 years, is there a core principle that Mitch McConnell would not compromise on? Is there a point where he'd say, no, I'm not going to do that? Is there anything that is, if you drove deep enough, you hit solid rock?
I think the closest thing that I saw was Ukraine. I mean, that was one decision where he had options. And the easiest thing would have been to say, I'll go along with the people that don't want to do it. But he did stand on that one. And, I think his old friend Lamar Alexander used to tell him, you're always to be remembered for the last thing you do. And so I think part of that was he was thinking, well, maybe this is the last big thing I do.
So just on that note, I was a little late because I went to pick up my wife a Reuben sandwich. And they said it had corned beef, Swiss cheese, sauerkraut, and Ukraine dressing. I told the guy that owned the place, I said, man, that's one of the best things I've ever seen in my life.
You. Hey.
Right? So anyway, but Mike, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I can't thank you enough for being a dear friend of ours. And I can't thank you enough for writing an important book about a very important figure in modern American politics. So I'll let you say goodbye, Albert.
No, I will second everything. And everybody out there, it's called The Price of Power, How Mitch McConnell Mastered the Senate, Changed America, and Lost His Party. It's not only a great read, it really is an important read. You'll learn a lot about politics and the Senate. And I think people who can't stand McConnell will have think it isn't tough enough. People who love McConnell will think it's too tough. I think it's just right. You've done a masterful job, Michael Tackett. So everybody out there, go get The Price of Power. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks very much. It's great to be with you guys.
Sleep cool, clean, and comfortable with Miracle Sheets. How much you sleep is a really good predictor of how healthy you are. And anything you can do, if you have high blood pressure, you take medication. If you have blood sugar, you take. I mean, it's just something you got to address because lack of sleep is like, high blood pressure is like having, insufficient insulin to do. I mean, it's more to study this, the more significant a factor it is, and the more they study it, the more they say that ambient temperature is a big factor on sleeping well. So why wouldn't you do this? You might add another 3 years to your life.
Yeah, because sleeping at the right temperature, it's a critical way also to feel rested the next day. If you wake up too hot or too cold, we highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused thermoregulating fabrics so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter what the weather is like outside. Plus, the silver lining prevents 99.7% of bacterial growth, which means Miracle Sheets require 3 times less laundry because they stay clean and fresh 3 times longer. Your bed will feel freshly made every night. So stop sleeping on bacteria that can clog your pores and cause breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle instead. Trust us, with no more gross odors, life is a whole lot better for your household. The NASA-inspired temperature-regulating silver-infused fabrics truly give you maximum comfort in any weather. And they make pillowcases and comforters also. So join us in getting better sleep every night. Not only are Miracle sheets luxuriously comfortable, they don't have the high price tag on other luxury brands. Miracle sheets feel nicer than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. So it's a vacation every time you get into bed. I usually picture myself actually probably over in Italy, but it's your call wherever you can picture yourself. Go to trymiracle.com/war room to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40% off. And if you use our promo code WARROOM at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. So Miracle is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/war room and use the code WARROOM to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/war room to treat yourself. So thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Look for the link in our show notes. Hey, James, our guest is Melissa Burke, who is the Washington Bureau Chief for the Detroit News, who has spent some time covering the election in the key battleground state of Michigan. I know you've spent most of your time, Melissa, on the Senate and congressional races, but let me just ask you about Michigan generally. It looks like it's a toss-up. Is that the way it feels out there?
It really does. We don't really see, it's unusual in that we don't really see either candidate having a lead at this point in Michigan. It's been that tight, right in the margin of error, which I think suggests that this could really come down to the party's turnout operations, in the days leading up to November 5th, and on election day itself.
Yeah. One of the issues that always comes up when you talk about Michigan is the Palestinian vote. There was a reasonably large protest vote against Joe Biden in the primary out there. And I don't know I'm not sure the number, correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's, as much as 2% of the electorate, but they've been pretty reliably Democratic. Is there any sense as to whether they're going to, go back to their roots, if you will, their political roots, and vote for Harris, or are they still protesting?
Some of them I'm sure could end up voting for Harris. It's tricky. It's tricky right now in Michigan. It's very hard to say what they're going to do. It's a very diverse community. One thing though that has changed in recent weeks is this campaign in Lebanon that I would point out. And Michigan, Metro Detroit in particular, has a very large Lebanese American community. A lot of the Arab Americans who live there are from Lebanon, came over to work in the auto factories, decades ago. And a lot of them are, hearing a lot from family who still live over there, friends that they have over in Lebanon about this campaign there. So, this previously was a lot of anger over Biden-Harris administration's, support for Israel in Gaza. But this is really expanded now. And you're seeing some signs in recent weeks, that this isn't going the way that maybe Harris was hoping. Her team is still reaching out to the community, trying to make inroads. But you've had a few indicators, like there's this PAC, the Arab American PAC, which is tied with the Arab American News in Dearborn. They came out last week and said, we don't recommend you vote for either Trump or Harris. We don't trust either of them. They even also said don't vote for either of the candidates in the U.S. Senate race in Michigan, which is really hot. right now. So, and you also have Trump, I would add, really chasing this vote. He sees an opportunity to make inroads in this community. He has gotten the endorsement of the Muslim American mayor in Hamtramck, which is a very tiny town kind of surrounded by Detroit on all sides, with a lot of foreign-born residents. And I saw a tweet this week that the Dearborn Heights mayor, who is also Muslim, Arab American, has also said that he's backing Trump. So Trump is taking this opportunity and trying to really win over some voters. He was in Hamtramck on Friday, made 2 stops there, talking to the community.
That's so ironic because his record and his rhetoric, other than trying to pander to those voters, has been very anti-Palestinian, or at least very, very pro-Netanyahu.
And some of the leaders in the community definitely point that out often, and say, what we have just terrible options. I do predict there's going to be a good number of them that will go for Jill Stein or who just skip the top of the ticket altogether.
James may want to come back to that. Let me ask one question about the Senate race. You've written some really good pieces on that. A month ago, we thought that Alyssa Slotkin was, a clear favorite to win. She's running against Mike Rogers, a former congressman. She is a congressman. Right now, it looks awfully tight, doesn't it?
It does. The Rogers has had kind of a late kick. I would maybe call it that. He got an infusion of money in the last month or so from Senate Leadership Fund. He has had a really rough time raising money in general in this race. He's been greatly outraised. So this late infusion of money from McConnell's group has really helped, I think, to amplify his message and attack Slotkin. I think it's a really fascinating matchup. These are both 2 quality candidates with national security backgrounds. And they are, they've got, they are just hammering, this state with ads right now. Everybody, knows that this race is happening. And it could come down, I don't know, again, it could come down to, how the top of the ticket does. Is it enough to kind of give Rogers a boost over the top that he needs to kind of close the deal? But I wouldn't underestimate Slotkin. I've covered her since 2018. She's like a battle-hardened candidate who won, Trump won districts 3 times, and knows how to, as she says, kind of lose better in Republican areas to try to run up the score.
She's got the support of Liz Cheney.
She did. She just got that today. Yeah, it's not the first time Cheney has endorsed her. She endorsed her, I believe, last cycle as well.
Right, right. James.
So this is not an unreasonable scenario. The race comes down to Michigan, and the Democrats lose Michigan because they severely underperform in the Palestinian communities in Southeast Michigan. That's not an unreasonable hypothesis, is it?
I don't think so. That's unreasonable. I think that it could be, small swings in this race could really matter. Whether I think what's hard to predict at this point is whether that small swing is in the Arab American community, in the Muslim American community in Metro Detroit, or if it's in the Black community. If voters don't turn out, in high enough numbers in Detroit or some other heavily African American cities for Harris.
So, because I live in the present, I don't think you can just let this go. You can't depend on things. I think that there should be a massive effort to use President Obama and President Clinton in the Detroit metro. Vote both for the Arab vote and for the Black vote also. I mean, it's one advantage that she has. She has some really well-known surrogates. And, as Detroit areas, what I'd call Southeast Michigan goes, so could the election. Mm-hmm. And I think that they need a massive intervention here in the next 13 days. That's my general view.
Yeah, well, yeah, Obama was there last night. He was in Detroit last night. He was on stage with Eminem, which was kind of a surprise addition at the last minute. I do think that maybe we will see Obama come back again for get out the vote efforts closer to the election. Michelle Obama is going to be in Kalamazoo in West Michigan with Harris on Saturday. I would add one thing that we are watching closely is none of the candidates so far or their surrogates have done any sort of rallies on two very large university campuses in Michigan, University of Michigan or MSU. MSU is inside of one of the hottest congressional races nationally, the 7th in Michigan. We haven't seen any visits or any rallies in these in either yet, and I'm kind of curious if that is coming, because I do think that could be key to turning out, some young voters for either candidate, particularly for Harris. That could be helpful, and for this candidate in the 7th for Congress. I do believe Obama came back in the last days in 2020 and did a big, huge rally in Ann Arbor. There just has not been a lot of attention paid to Ann Arbor so far, and we're watching that. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, from what I know about Michigan, it's been some time, the percentage of Michigan students at Michigan State is substantially higher than it is in Ann Arbor. In other words, of Michigan residents at Michigan. I can also tell you they don't like each other at all. At all.
No. And in fact, we were trying to figure out where. We knew Harris was coming back this weekend. We were trying to figure out where they were going to go and what time, because the Michigan MSU football game, I believe, is this weekend, and nobody wants to, be the counter programming for that game.
Stay away from that one.
I'll tell you, my baptism in Michigan politics is we had the second debate in Lansing, but we do prep somewhere else and then go up. And so we did it right outside of Ann Arbor. And I went to take a run. And of course, it was cold in Michigan in October. So I just walked in the Sunday shop. I got a sweatshirt, of course, it was made in blue. It was Michigan. I didn't think much of it. And then we got to Lansing, and I had about a scrum of maybe 1,000 people outside the hotel. And I went out there with a Michigan sweatshirt. I lasted about 2 seconds. I'll never vote for Clinton, you son of a bitch. Oh, excuse me. Clinton says, you dumb son of a bitch, you don't go to Lansing and go out there with a Michigan sweatshirt. I said, shit, I didn't know. Almost got fired.
Melissa, I think James and I talked earlier. I think he's got a brilliant idea, and that is to put Bill Clinton for a day or two in those Arab and Palestinian communities. He was a guy who really almost came up with a two-state solution there. He has been far friendlier, or far more supportive, rather, of the Palestinian cause and the Arab cause than Donald Trump could ever hope to be. He's credible. Do you think some of those people would listen? Some of those voters would listen to him?
I do. I think that they've been doing a lot of listening. They've been meeting with all these candidates. They've met with Trump. They've met with Harris. I think they want to find somebody that they can believe in, and I think there's just a lot of pain in the community right now. I do think they would listen. I do think that a lot of them don't see Trump as a real alternative for them. And I think a lot of them, it's painful to think, about leaving the top of the ticket blank, right? They know what it means to vote in Michigan, how critical Michigan is, and its 15 electoral votes is to the White House, to the race to the White House. So I would never tell you that's a bad idea. If he's going to go, he should go soon, maybe. The days are running short. But I think there's just a lot of frustration.
James, you can come back to that, but let me ask you just a couple more quick ones, Melissa. There are a couple House races that are important. We focus so much on the Senate, we forget how close the battle is for control of the House. You have a couple out there, don't you? We
have 4 that I would call swing districts since redistricting in 2021. The one I mentioned, the 7th, which is kind of mid-Michigan, it's kind of anchored by Lansing. And that's where the MSU vote could be really critical. That is Slotkin's seat right now. We were talking about the Senate race. Slotkin is the Democratic nominee. This is her congressional race. It is now her congressional seat that's now open. She won it by about 5 in 22. Biden won it by like just under 1 point in 20 under these lines. But Trump would have won it in 16 by like 4, if that gives you a good idea. It is going to be very tight. There is nearly 33,000 kids. We were talking about how many students are MSU. I just looked up and it's about 33,000 MSU kids who voted in the last presidential election. They also turned out big in 22 when Michigan had an abortion ballot initiative up, right? That turned out a lot of young people. So the question is, do these kids come back out? Are they engaged? Are they paying attention now that abortion is not on the ballot this time in the same way? So it'll be really interesting. It's Tom Barrett and Curtis Hertel are 2 former state senators that are running there. Now, the other one that I would just quickly highlight is the 10th, which is in Metro Detroit. It is like southern Macomb County and a couple towns in Oakland County. This race surprised us all 2 years ago because it was decided by about 1,500 votes, like half a percentage point. We didn't even have the result on election night. We had to wait till the next day. And that race involved a Democrat named Carl Marlinga, longtime judge and prosecutor in Macomb County, and now freshman Republican Congressman John James, who had run statewide twice for Senate. And the key for Marlinga understanding that race 2 years ago was Marlinga had zero help from from national Democrats. He barely raised any money. He was outspent something like 5-1 by James. And so the fact that he almost eked this out was just shocker to everybody. This time, Democrats are paying attention. They are spending on Marlinga's behalf. We just did a poll in this race this week, and it had James up still within the margin of error by about 3.5. But the top issue people were talking about, they were concerned about, was abortion. So that could help Marlinga in the end. But I'm predicting we're not going to know who wins this race.
I've had Democrats tell me that's a district they should win. And the problem with Marlinga is he's almost as old as Carville and me. And if they had a younger, fresher candidate, but I don't want to sound like an ageist, Melissa.
I will say I agree that there is a big generational gap there between the two of those candidates. But Marlinga has been running in Macomb County since, the 80s. Like, he's got really wide name recognition. And in the end, I can't imagine that doesn't help him.
Let me ask one more, which you mentioned earlier about it could come down to the ground game to get out the vote. The Michigan Republican Party has had huge divisions. I mean, big fights over who's the chair. It's kind of the MAGA versus the super MAGA versus some of the older line conservatives. Have they healed those divisions? Because if they haven't, it's going to make it hard to have the kind of ground game they need.
They have been trying very hard, led by Pete Hoekstra, former congressman, former ambassador, and they are in a better place than they were 9 months ago, for sure. They are definitely not where they were financially, strength-wise, a few years ago. It's hard to tell organization-wise, like how much they've recovered, but they are partnering big time with Mike Rogers' campaign, with the Trump campaign on their ground game. The strategy that the Trump campaign is using is to turn out these low propensity voters that they have identified in Michigan. We're not exactly sure how many, but this is like, the idea is to contact them over and over again by different means, following up, trying to get them to turn out because they believe that if they do, they're going to vote, hopefully straight ticket for the Republicans. So that is their strategy right now. It's unclear how that's going to go. I will say that the two campaigns are absolutely blitzing Michigan right now. We have weekly visits, from both candidates and their running mates. It's exhausting for the team on the ground there. So it's Everybody knows if you don't know the election is coming in Michigan, you are living under a rock.
Right. James, you want to wrap this up?
I'll wrap it up with one question, okay? Fill in the blank. As goes blank county, so goes Michigan. What county should we look at as the real bell?
Well, the key bellwether right now that everybody points to is Saginaw County, which is kind of up near Flint in kind of if you're looking at the mitten, it's, right around here. It's the Tri-Cities area. Saginaw has voted for I think it's the last 5 presidential elections. Don't quote me on that. Has voted for the victor. But I would also point you to several other counties that we are watching closely. The two of them, Wayne, which is the most populous, where Detroit is. But there's also Oakland County, Kent County, which is home to Grand Rapids. Both of those are historically Republican strongholds that have been trending Democratic. Both campaigns are obviously concentrating heavily on there's tons of visits to both of those counties. They are really both hoping to run up the score in each of those places to try to, narrow the margin, make sure that they win.
I'm going to just pick Saginaw, and I'm going to be looking for that, and then just see where it goes. Thank you so much, Melissa. It was great.
Melissa, you've been terrific.
You really have. It's very
Thanks
insightful.
for having me.
We appreciate your time. I wish we could see which books you have back there, but someday we'll figure that out. But you really have been great. And everybody watch the Wolverine State.
There you go.
Thanks again.
Level up your fall wardrobe with Quince. They say the clothes make a person, and I think that's true. And if it's not true, why do you have all of these stylists? Why do people go pay more attention to you the better you dress? There's 1,000, pieces of research that tell you that. And, when you try to make it in this world, whatever advantage that you can carve out for yourself is a good advantage. And having clothes that fit like this, look like this, and cost as little as they do, you're going to be able to wear something different to the office every day, and you can afford it.
Right. So looking great, can really be a key to success. And now that fall's here, it's time to upgrade your wardrobe. There are holiday parties, big group gatherings, and important end-of-the-year meetings. And if you're, like us, you always want to make a big impression. That means it's time to ditch the flip-flops and layer up with a showstopper like cozy cashmere sweaters or a suave leather jacket from Quince. We all want a style to reflect confidence and sophistication, which is why we wanted to tell you about Quince and what they have to offer. Quince has affordable, high-quality essentials for any wardrobe, complete with seasonal must-haves like Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $60 and comfortable pants for any occasion. We love that Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. They partner with them directly, cutting out the cost of the middleman and passing the savings on to you. That means Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands, so you can update your look without breaking the bank. Favorites, might include luxurious Mongolian cashmere cardigan sweaters and the stretch wool dress pant. The material feels amazing, and they are the perfect combo for looking good and keeping warm. The style is perfect for holiday parties, reading in the recliner, or getting things done around the hill. As comfortable as the fabrics are, we guarantee you'll be even more comfortable with the prices. Style, luxury, and price. Quince has the perfect combo. So don't wait. Upgrade your wardrobe with pieces made to last with Quince. Go to quince.com/war room for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/war room to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Again, quince.com/war room. You also can find the link in our show notes. As promised, my final outrage before the election is going to be on the existential dangers Donald Trump poses. Understand, this is not like the Obama-Romney race or Bush-Dukakis, where both sides mattered, but the future was not about democracy or the role of America in the world. It's not a hoax, to begin with, that the Russians interfered with the 2016 election to help Trump. Remember that. It happened. Trump campaign chief Paul Manafort shared internal polling information with a Russian agent. Dirty trickster Roger Stone knew in advance about the Russian-sponsored WikiLeaks on the Clinton emails. And the Trump high command, including Donnie Jr., met with Russian agents in New York. None of this, the Trump people didn't report any of this to American intelligence. Now, the Mueller report, the intelligence community, and the Republican-run Senate Intelligence Committee all concluded the Russians interfered to help Trump. The only uncertainty was whether you could prove a legal collusion. Now, in a second Trump term, where he's going to have no inhibitions, he will cozy up more to those dictators he admires so much, starting with Putin. John Kelly, by the way, this week reiterated to the New York Times and the Atlantic how Trump used to talk about the good things that Hitler did. The good things that Hitler did. He just loves dictators. He will sell out Ukraine, pull out or cripple NATO. European countries from Lithuania to Poland will be in peril. Trump is an existential danger, not just for Americans, but for the free world. Please remember that in these final 11 days.
One of the great burdens that a lot of people walk around with is they just can't help but tell the truth. I mean, that's the truth. And one of my great philosophical lessons in life is a story about some farmer being sworn in as a witness in a trial. And so they said, put your hand on the Bible. And they said, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? And the farmer looks at the judge and says, which one you want, Judge? And all of these truth tellers, and, the Ellie Honigs and the Brett Stevens, well, they're just burdened by the necessity to tell the truth. Normal people are not like that. They're just an elevated truth teller. So let me give you two truths. Let's do the truth of blackmail. All right? It is a truth that when Kamala Harris was younger and unmarried, that she dated Willie Brown. Willie Brown is a black male. Of that, there can be no doubt.
Single.
That's the truth.
Both unmarried.
You can't deny that. Of course, the New York Times, right, both single, and of course, the New York Times has a story about she had a social life when she was a prosecutor. What a crime! But that's not my point. There's another black male. That is Dan Coates, who over 2 years was director of national intelligence, who is the quintessential definition of a conservative Republican senator, served in Indiana, was, is that kind of ilk of person, was probably the perfect manifestation of that. And it's the truth that he said that he's almost certain that Trump is being blackmailed by Putin. Now, both are black males. Kamala dated a black male, undeniable. But okay, both were single. And the DNI, a lifelong conservative Republican, says in his opinion that Trump is being blackmailed by the Kremlin. So I'm sick of truth tellers, okay? I'm sick, I'm up to my nose in people that tell you it is just incumbent upon me to be a truth teller, to be impartial, to be fair, to give both sides an equal due. For God's sakes, give both sides an equal due on the question of blackmail and tell the truth about both.
Couldn't agree
because that's
more.
what the truth is.
Hey, we got some big news. If you're in the Los Angeles area into politics and you want an ultimate inside look on the 2024 election, get tickets to Carville, Winning is Everything, Stupid, a new documentary by Matt Tarnower in theaters starting October 25th at the La Mille Royale in Santa Monica. The film follows our very own Mr. Carville through the current cultural and political landscape and delves into his marriage to Republican strategist Mary Madeline, offering an inside look at how they navigate their bipartisan life. What do you think people are going to enjoy the most about the film, James? And don't say it's our technological deficiencies, okay?
Right. Look, it's a well-made movie, and I'm going to be there myself, and Matt, the director, is going to be there, and we'd love to watch it with you and answer questions and be part of a larger discussion after the documentary and talk about some themes in it. So I just invite everybody to come out. By the way, the 25th is my birthday, so come out. Maybe we'll light a candle and have a drink or something.
Wow, this is our last show with James Carville in his 70s. I mean, you're going to have two 80-year-olds starting next week.
Go.
Wow.
There we go.
So if you're looking for an unfiltered take on the state of politics, the Carville-Madeline dynamic, and the drama of the 2024 election, you definitely want to get your tickets now. James and director Matt Tarnower will be there after the screening for a Q&A on the 25th and 26th. Get tickets now at carvilledoc.com/ticket. That's carvilledoc.com/tickets. For updates and some great behind-the-scenes content, follow James on Twitter @JamesCarville, and get this, and on his new TikTok @RealJamesCarville. You won't want to miss it. And now for our listener questions. God, James, if anything, they get better every week. Tom in Toronto, Canada, says young Black and Hispanic men have been moving towards Trump. What possible argument could Harris put forward to shift this drift in the last 11 days?
Well, first of all, I am not sure that Harris herself can do much about this. I think that hopefully there's a surrogate strategy to try to deal with this and have kind of people for young Black men respect to look up to, I think highly of, and inundate them with what's going on. And they're under, I think, the very erroneous conclusion that it doesn't matter. If you look at the last 4 years, the differential between white and Black unemployment is a historical low. Yes, it's still more whites percent unemployed than Blacks, but they've done a good job of narrowing the gap. And if you just look across the board, that is going to have a significant impact on your life. A lot of young Black men have parents who are older. Trump's going to do everything he can to privatize Social Security and Medicare, which is going to place an additional burden on you. But I'm not sure that Harris herself is going to be able to close the deal with the kind of loss we've had of younger Black males. But I think they can have an effective surrogate strategy.
And somebody ought to talk about the Supreme Court and the judicial appointments, because these right-wing Republicans are anti-voting rights, they're anti-affirmative action, they're anti a whole lot of things that these young Black men that will affect their lives. And so that ought to be more of an issue than it's been, again, probably from surrogates. Steve in Burbank, California, says, why hasn't the Harris campaign been touting the Biden-Harris economic gains? I haven't seen any of those ads out here in California. Steve, I'm in North Carolina and talked to some voters yesterday. I think that's a hard ask. I really do. I think they really do. They associate Harris with Biden. She hasn't separated herself on the economic issue. And they think that, Trump was probably better on the economy. I think when it comes to that, what they have to do more than tout their record, which some voters, marginal voters are skeptical, they have to really let people know how bad the Trump proposals are. The tariffs, the tax cuts for rich billionaires, and other issues. Some of the regulatory stuff where he's going to let the oil companies write an oil bill. I really have to say, I think that the negative hits on Trump is more effective than touting the Biden-Harris economic gains.
So I made myself a pledge for the last 2 weeks of the campaign. I'm not going to say anything critical about Harris because I think this election is so important and there's a ton of time to be critical or self-reflective. Having said that, I thought one of the worst answers she gave in the campaign was, well, there's really no difference between Trump and Biden.
Right.
myself.
She tried to
I think
correct it
that was
later, but you're absolutely right.
right. And I can't believe that she wasn't prepared for that. One of these days we'll get the backstory as to what happened, but it was not her finest hour.
Yeah, no question. Jonathan in Portland, Oregon, I ask you, James, given Trump's continuing mental decline, which is clear, there's a cognitive decline, and why don't Democratic ads and talking points recognize that more and drive home a vote for Trump is a vote for J.D. Vance as president?
So here's the kind of conflicting thing. You're coming down, you got less than 2 weeks. If you say he's in cognitive, one people you want to say, General Kelly, General Milley, a whole bunch of people have compared him to Hitler. But then your other message is he's in mental decline, which is probably true. He didn't know where he is half the time. He's always confused. Well, if that's the case, he's not that much of a danger. And so you got to pick one of the two. And it's always a temptation is to kind of do both. And if you think he's a threat to democracy, a threat to constitutional order, a threat to the Western alliance, if he's in mental decline, it doesn't matter. Now, I think the real truth behind this, and particularly with the kind of Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, I think they know, and I'm going to be very clear, this is my opinion, but I think I'm right. They know he's in mental decline. They don't think there's any chance that if he's elected, that he's going to finish his term. And they know that their bought, paid for pet puppy is J.D. Vance, who believes all that shit. And so when you see the Musk and the Thiel out there, they're making a probably a good but a very cynical bet. They're betting on J.D. Vance. That's simply what's going on. They don't anymore think that this guy is going to be anywhere a cognitively functioning person 4 years from now. And neither do I, and I think neither does anyone else. And that's how cynical American politics are.
Yeah. James, Jim in Babcock Ranch, Florida says many people don't like identity politics, but in 2008, many Americans were proud to elect our first black president, including me. That's Jim. 16 years later, we have a chance to elect our first woman president. Will the chance to make history again be a consideration for some voters, and should it be emphasized? Of course, it's going to be a consideration for some voters, Jim, but no, it shouldn't be emphasized. She doesn't have to say, I'm a black woman. You think anybody doesn't know that? Barack Obama did not run to be the first black president. He ran to become a Democratic president, cleaning up some of the terrible Bush policies. And I think Hillary Clinton made a mistake in 2016 when she too much emphasized breaking the glass ceiling. I think Harris actually has handled this, darn well, James.
I think she has. She hasn't uttered a word. By the way, no Democrat anywhere is uttering any of this identity politics nonsense. All right? No one. You don't hear anybody using terms like Latinx or,
right.
Communities of color
Latinx.
or any of it. Right. That's just Latinx or whatever it is. It's the word so stupid I don't even want to pronounce it right. But the residue, I think, does hurt us somewhat. And, these images, these kinds of things tend to be very sticky. They stick in the back of people's mind. So you want to justify voting for a criminal because you want a tax cut. You said, well, yeah, I can't say that. I'm not going to look good. So you say, I'm going to vote for the criminal because of identity politics, of which she doesn't engage in. It's just and they have they have all of these justifications. My favorite being the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which might be the most intellectually and ethically vapid group of people that exist in America today, saying that calling Trump a fascist is a Democrat made-up thing. What the shit you talking about? You think John Kelly was a Democrat? You think Martin Milley is a Democrat? You think Dan Coates is a freaking Democrat? If there was any intellectual context for these people or any defense of them, I can't think of it. I really can't. And I would give anything, and maybe one of our readers could try to get, I won't get mad, but I'm trying to think of any defense for this, and there is none. And that's so true across the board to these people when the whole Constitution is at risk. Well, I didn't like the, Latinx or Latinx, whatever the fuck it is, okay? Come on, get over it, man. There's bigger fish to fry here.
Ben in Brisbane, we love those listeners down under. We got Ben in Brisbane, Australia. James, he wants to know how you teach Democrats to speak less complicatedly. I worry their leaders, including the vice president, often lose the impact through overly sophisticated language.
It's been a problem. I couldn't agree with you more. I think we're trying to extricate ourselves from it a little bit. I think they're trying to speak a little cleaner or crisp. The problem is there's a lot of part of the liberal culture that still insists on using this jackass language. This morning, I'm listening to NPR, which I find, in one hand, quite informative, on the other hand, maddeningly frustrating, talking about the vegan community. Does any normal person use the term vegan community? I have no idea. Where do they meet? What are they part of? What do they do? I mean, I know plenty of people that are vegan, but I don't know that there's some, everything is a community. That's the favorite Democratic word that ever existed, which I don't mind it. I like being part of a community. But it just so says something that you send so many coded signals out to so many people that they don't even realize it.
Well, we're going to figure out which community James Carville's in, and we'll let you know. We'll let you know next week. Yeah. Susan in Philadelphia. A good question. Susan says, I am fearful of another Trump presidency, but I'm almost as fearful for what happens if Trump loses. Susan, you are right. The worst thing in the world is if Trump wins, and we will have a fascist government, as both Mark Milley and John Kelly, as former chief of staff, have said. And the next worst thing is when he loses, because he won't accept it. He never has. And they've already prepared to try to contest it by creating new electors in places like North Carolina and Georgia. It's going to get ugly. I don't think there'll be a January 6th. I think it'll be more on the state level.
So I'm a kind of person, I live in the present. And the present right now is on the next 2 weeks, actually under the next 2 weeks. And I'm sorry, if you just win, you can deal with the other problem. Okay?
Oh, I'd prefer that.
Right now, and I understand where our friend is coming from, but don't waste any time thinking about the aftermath. Spend all your time thinking about the present, because the present is, a wise sage once said, the present is what we live in. Goddamn right, you do. And the present right now is win the fucking thing on November 5th, and then worry about the aftermath after the aftermath. We got thousands of lawyers that are on standby for this.
Well, and we got the great Seth Waxman leading them, so I feel comfortable about that. Yeah. James, final question. Pete in Phoenix, Arizona. This baffles me too. Help me understand, why are the polls in Arizona showing a consistent Trump advantage when he thinks the reality on the ground is different, and Ruben Gallego is winning by double digits, and the pro-choice amendment is going to carry by 20 points?
The first thing to do is, literally people say this, individual polls that come out here and there, they can fluctuate, different methods. I think you're onto something, because Rubin's not going to win by 12 and Harris lose by 2. I don't think political gravity of this day would provide for something like that. And you're on the ground. We're supposed to lose it in 2020. We won it narrowly. And you're right. And just kind of, to the best you can, try not to understand or explain polls away, because there's something called plus or minus 3.5 that exists in every poll. That's just a fact of life. I don't care how good it is. And some of them you see are pretty shitty. So I just wouldn't. I don't really believe this. I really don't pay attention to it right now. I just, if I do, I would try to say, well, how can you be down 5 in Arizona and up 1 in Nevada? How can you be this? How can Gallego be 12 ahead and she be down? You're just going to drive yourself crazy.
Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Remember to get your tickets for the Politics War Room Tour. James and I are bringing the podcast to you live on stage at Boston's Schubert Theater on November 2nd with special guest historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. You can get tickets at politicon.com/tour, and we can't wait to see you there. Now, as always, send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the links to our sponsors, Mint Mobile, Miracle Made, and Quince, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, you help make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and check out our Substack at politicswarroom.com. James and I are constantly adding new content, so go take a look. You can also find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. Remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our war room planning up to this crucial election.